A surprising and historic endorsement by the Detroit News, the fallout from the presidential debate with our MiWeek roundtable, and a new way to focus on Detroit's neighborhoods. Stay right there. We're in Detroit at the Historical Museum, and MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Christy McDonald. We are at the Detroit Historical Museum on the second floor at the Innovation Gallery, and we have politics on the brain this week, coming off the first presidential debate and the shocker on the Detroit News editorial page. Coming up, we will talk about why the paper decided to endorse Libertarian Gary Johnson. The first time in the history of the Detroit News that the editorial board went with a candidate who was not a Republican. Then we'll have a full MiWeek table, and our guests will go over the fallout from the presidential debate this week. And we'll take a look at a new initiative to connect our community spaces. And Detroit is one of 4 cities in the country chosen for this program. We'll explain that, and it is all coming up for you. But first, we'll start with the Detroit News endorsement of Gary Johnson. And who better to explain than the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, Nolan Finley, and the deputy editor of the editorial page, Ingrid Jacques. It's good to see both of you. Welcome back to MiWeek, Ingrid.
Thank you.
All right, I want to go through this because I think it's very interesting. Not a lot of people get to know the thought process behind an endorsement, and very shocked that the Detroit News did not endorse Republican Donald Trump. Nolan, take us through kind of some of the steps and when you started thinking about Donald Trump was maybe not your candidate.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's fitting that we're at the Historic Museum because this is a rather historic moment for our newspaper. We've been aligned with conservative candidates, Republican candidates since 1873, 143 years. And this year we took a look at the Republican candidate and decided that, and it wasn't an easy decision. We've been talking about it for months, but we decided that he just rubbed hard against our conservative values and our values as Americans, and that we just couldn't bring ourselves to put our influence behind Donald Trump. We feel like he's in many ways a reckless candidate, in every way a reckless candidate. He has the potential to be a very dangerous person if he were elected president, and his values, his principles don't align at all with ours.
And I know that you've been talking about this for quite a while, Ingrid, and you said back even before the conventions, the conversations started. What were some of those, I guess, what were some of the points that was being bandied about the room when the editorial board talks about this?
Well, we have been talking about it a lot, especially since the conventions, but even before, when it looked like Donald Trump had pretty much sealed up the nomination, we started definitely having conversations around the office. Nothing formal, though, until the last few weeks. We've really been sitting down as an editorial board and figuring out how we're going to approach this, because it is a big deal. In over 143 years, this will be the first non-Republican, and I think it's also worth noting, while we wouldn't put our support behind Trump, we also looked at Hillary Clinton, and we made the decision not to support her as well. We didn't want to make her our first Democratic endorsement when 2 of the other times the paper withheld an endorsement was during the Franklin Roosevelt administration, and we didn't endorse him twice, so we weren't going to make Hillary our first Democrat.
Why not just say, you know what, we're not going to endorse anybody? Why Gary Johnson then, Nolan?
Well, we've done that before, and that's probably where we would have gone this time. Three times.
Yeah.
The last time was in 2004 with Bush Kerry. We found those 2 candidates unacceptable for an endorsement, and in hindsight, they make these, these 2 candidates make them look, like, gosh, give them to us. We probably would have done that, but we looked at Gary Johnson as a serious candidate because former governor, and William Weld on his ticket, former governor of Massachusetts. We felt they were competent and capable and could lead this nation, and we think if there's a viable choice out there, we ought to offer it.
Yeah, but voters could say, oh, but you know what, it's a throwaway vote. Gary Johnson, he can't win. How do you counter that?
Well, he can win if enough people vote for him. And I think we're locked into this notion we can only support Republican and Democrats. And even if he can't win, even if it's a long shot, I don't think you waste your vote if you vote your conscience. And I think if you're holding your nose and saying, I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils, I'm going to vote against a candidate rather than for a candidate, I think that is a waste of your vote.
One of the lines that stuck out to me, Ingrid, was, but this is an endorsement of conscience. It's also an emphatic statement that anybody is better than Donald Trump. Who do you think that you are going to get the most heat from or blowback from for the paper making this kind of endorsement?
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Donald Trump supporters out there, a lot of people in the Republican Party, a lot of hardcore Republicans who will see this as kind of us abandoning them. But we don't see it that way at all, and we hope that a lot of our readers take our endorsement into serious consideration and make kind of a proactive vote. As Nolan said, vote for somebody rather than just against somebody else, which is where I think the majority of Americans are. The majority of Clinton and Trump supporters are saying they'll vote for them because they don't like the other candidate, and I think that's a tough place to be in.
I want to talk about what an overall statement I think that newspaper endorsements make. I mean, we've talked before in the past, Nolan, that maybe endorsements don't mean so much anymore. Do you think an endorsement like this will make a significant statement?
I think when a newspaper surprises, when a newspaper does what's not expected of them, it has more impact than when they simply do, what they've done for 140 years. And I think a lot of people probably looked at this and said, well, they'll hold their nose and endorse Trump because they always do. And, we feel like we have to adhere to our principles. We haven't changed. We haven't changed our values. Republican nominee doesn't adhere to the values that we've always associated with the party, and we're not going to be knee-jerk. And I think this will get some attention. People may look and say, particularly folks who are going to just pass on the presidential ballot. And we keep hearing from a lot of people saying, I'm not going to vote for president.
Sure.
People may look at this and say, I can pull a lever for somebody.
Ingrid?
I agree, and I think that's a better place to be, to actually be in favor of somebody. And we like Gary Johnson. He came in and talked to us, talked to our editorial board, and he assured us on some of the issues we were a little concerned about, such as his stance on foreign policy. Obviously, there was the Aleppo comment, but he gave us enough information that we really do feel that he would be a competent leader and someone that's trustworthy.
Let me ask you this. What do you think that this endorsement, though, says on the larger scope of how important endorsements are from publications?
Well, I think they're still important. I'm biased, I'm in the business, but I know that even when we endorse in much smaller races, local, state legislative races, those often get shared around Facebook, Twitter, more than a lot of other things we write. So I think people do read them and take them seriously, and we hope they take our advice here.
And the thought process that you put into this, Nolan, and especially the amount of years that you've put in the paper, kind of qualify for me what this decision was like and now the after effect of it.
Well, we are keepers of a trust here, and you don't want to break faith with your readers, and you don't. But we thought in this case, we looked at Donald Trump, and we saw a guy who was just far too unpredictable, erratic, for us to endorse. We have endorsed Democrats in a lot of other races. The Terry Land, Gary Peters race, for example. We endorsed Gary Peters because Terry Land didn't give us a sort of candidate we could put our name behind. But in this case, we looked first at Donald Trump and disqualified him. Then we looked at Hillary Clinton and we decided character matters too. She certainly has the resume, the skills, the temperament to be president, but her challenges with honesty, ethics, and self-dealing politics scared us to death. And we couldn't put our name behind that and have to defend that for the next 4 years. And so we moved on down the line and found a candidate we could support. We're very comfortable with this.
So about that debate this week. Now we're all watching to see if numbers change in close states, especially here in Michigan. So let's get to this week's roundtable. You know Nolan and Ingrid, and let's welcome back Karen Dumas and Howard Edelson. Karen is the former communications head for Detroit Mayor Dave Bing and now the host of Afternoon Drive on WFDF 910 AM radio. And Howard Edelson, a Democratic political strategist. Welcome back. It's good to see you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, let's start in on the conversation. So about that debate, I think when it was over, after the 90 minutes, I felt like I was exhausted and I wasn't even on stage. I had my feet up on my ottoman. So I want to go around the table here and get just a little bit of perspective from each one of you on how you felt it went perspective-wise. Noel, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I thought Hillary Clinton played him perfectly, played Donald Trump perfectly. You know, he feels he has to answer every slight. So she just kept jabbing, 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 and kept him on defense all night. He used all his time to defend himself and never made the sort of transition to giving his own statements and attacking her. And you know, so you don't need a knockout punch in that situation. You just need to wear him down with little hits because he beats himself.
And he just kept on talking, interrupting. Howard, let me ask you, what you think?
Like Nolan, I think Hillary Clinton cleaned his clock, and if there was ever a debate that really showed that he is not qualified to be president and doesn't have the temperament, the other night was the night.
So in temperament and substance, or just temperament?
Both. You know, at one point he's talking about nuclear policy, and he starts talking about Rosie O'Donnell. I'm not sure how the two interrelate, but he really didn't have coherent plans, details to his plans, really much.
Okay, and Ingrid, let me ask you what you think.
I pretty much agree. I mean, I think he could have done worse, maybe, but it was definitely typical Trump performance, and I don't think he had prepared enough substance to go along with it. I mean, some of his comments were just comical and definitely played into Clinton's hand. And I'd say he wasn't helped by Lester Holt, especially toward the end. He was getting grilled on a lot of his comments, you know, going back many years ago, even about the Iraq War. But yet Hillary was left pretty unscathed in a lot of that. There were definitely things that could have been brought up about her record that weren't.
Yeah, we'll talk about moderation, I think, in a little bit. Karen, what was your thought?
I think debate was the operative word. I didn't see much of a debate that night. I do think it was more of a battle of temperament, and it kind of reminded me of 2:30 in elementary school before an after-school fight. You know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to see you. That was my takeaway. It was.
Interesting, you know, they brought up Michigan. Within the first, 5 minutes of the debate, Trump started talking about Ford and jobs, and I could just imagine Mark Fields of Ford screaming at the television saying that we're not cutting any jobs. Nolan, talk about the impact of the debate and focusing a little bit on Michigan and some of these battleground states up in the very beginning, hoping to maybe pique people's interests, or?
Yeah, you know, I'm really curious about why both campaigns are paying so much attention to Michigan. I would have thought that, Michigan's always comes down to being a Democratic state. I'd like to hear Howard's thoughts on this, why they think Michigan is in play, because they clearly do. Trump's coming back here tomorrow. The Clinton camp's been in and out. By this time, John McCain had already pulled out, and Mitt Romney had slowed way down and realized the state wasn't going to go his way. She still looks like she has about a 5-point lead here, and yet they seem to think Michigan's in play.
Howard, what do they know that we don't know?
Part of when you put a campaign together, part of a good offense is a good defense. And I think what they're doing, the Trump campaign, is trying to keep Hillary and the Democrats here rather than having her go to other swing states. So Nolan's right. There's 5 points advantage to Hillary, and I think the numbers will increase after the debate, and we see recent polling. But this is a blue state. It hasn't gone red since George Bush, the first George Bush. So I think it's just trying to keep her here and not in other swing states.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting now to see the numbers coming out of the debate.
Yeah.
They said number-wise, if you want to look at numbers, 84 million people watched this debate, and I hope they watched it all the way through. But do you think that it's going to make a significant jump? Because we've sometimes debated debates, like if they actually really do have any kind of impact. Karen, what do you think?
I think there are so many people that are still on the fence. I mean, I think you have a lot of people that are just party loyal, and that will ride it through to the end. And I think that's maybe why they're still coming back to Michigan, because I think at this point it's still anybody's election, because I don't think anybody on either side is just totally 200% sold on their candidate.
Okay, so if you think it's still anybody's election at this point, what are the topics, or what are the things that are going to change people's minds at this point, Ingrid, do you think?
That's a good question. I just wanted to add on to Karen's point that there was a Wall Street Journal poll right before the debate, just seeing how much influence the debates might have in the election. And there was, I think it was about 34% said they were going to be looking to the debates to shape their opinion. And I thought that was a really significant number, that we're going to be letting these debates play that bigger role. But I think just being on social media during the debate, I think a lot of people are hoping there'd be more discussion about, like, more attention to immigration, education, other issues that people care a lot about.
Yeah, I didn't really hear a lot about anything, which is, I guess, was what was frustrating for me. But the one thing I said, maybe the good thing that came out of this debate was that people sat down and Googled stop and frisk, that they maybe Googled Ford and jobs, and that they maybe heard a couple of things that the candidate said and wanted to know a little bit more about that. Howard, what do you think?
I think that's right. It increased awareness of some of the issues, but at this point, if people are undecided after this long of an election, I wonder what more information they really need. You have two brands who have 100% name ID. It's been, the campaign has been on national news, social media, covered in every which way. And if people are still undecided, I don't know what more they need.
What is it? What more do they need?
I think they may not vote, is what I think.
I think they more likely Googled, who did Trump call a pig, a slob, a dog? I mean, that was at the end of that, and Rosie O'Donnell, getting thrown in there at the end. There was so much, like, what? What are they talking about? I think they're more.
It really devolved.
Yeah.
It's a food fight.
But you've
Or a
got
bad 90s reality show.
But you've got Republicans that are endorsing Hillary. So I mean, I still think these on both sides are probably not the ideal candidates for either party, and people are still trying to figure out. I mean, they're looking for substance that they've not yet gotten. So it's like, okay, are they going to say something that I either like, something that I'll Google and be intrigued by, something to sell them between now and the election?
Okay, so let me ask. So substance on what? Is it national security? Is it jobs? I mean, what do you think those undecideds want to hear? What are they waiting to hear on what topic?
You said something just a minute ago when you said this was a presidential debate. And I kept thinking while I was watching it, I've watched a lot of presidential debates over the decades. There was nothing presidential about this. There was not that same weight, that same feeling that this is the highest office in the world. And these two people are up here. Really, I mean, it was almost offensive to watch when you think about the weight of that office. And I think these debates are all about temperament. I don't think they're about specifics on the issues. I think voters are looking to see a president. I'm not sure they saw a president on that stage. I thought, Hillary Clinton showed a lot of disrespect for the process with that sort of bemused condescension she was showing, and that laugh and smirk throughout this campaign. I know she doesn't respect Donald Trump, and a lot of people don't, but she went into that debate tied with him, and she should have been asking herself, how on earth am I tied with this buffoon?
Yeah, but you talk about like poking him, and she was just sitting back and kind of watching what would unfold.
But she had a better
She played him on several things and set him up on quite a few, and she attacked. One of the things that he really speaks and trades on is his business accomplishments, and we saw the other night, she went after those business accomplishments on bankruptcy, not paying taxes, and how Donald Trump stiffs vendors and contractors. And I think we're going to see more of that as the campaign moves on.
But Howard, her job was more than just to take down Trump. I mean, Trump's doing a good job of that. His number's not moving. I mean, he's as he's her best tool. Her job was also to establish herself as a trustworthy person you could see in the White House. She would have been served well in addressing questions about her email and about the other things that voters have concerns about.
Well, I think she did address a little bit about her email. And Ingrid, you had
much,
mentioned
but-
something about trustworthiness. Do you think that, Karen, should have been a question somewhere along the line to Hillary Clinton about trustworthiness?
I don't think answering a question about trustworthiness establishes trustworthiness. I think it's been her demeanor. I think the issue with the email and some other things surrounding her campaign that have made the American public question whether or not she's trustworthy. She's not very personable, and so she came across at the debate just detached, and it's almost as though she were reading talking points. And I think that's that lack of connection that she makes. On the other hand, you've got Donald Trump. He's making a connection, but he's making a connection with a demographic that that's fueled by fear and hatred and further disconnect in America. I mean, that's not a good thing on either side.
I'm no defender of Donald Trump, but I do think a lot of the people supporting him don't necessarily fall into those categories. And I mean, there's a lot of voters who are put in a very uncomfortable position. They don't want to vote. There's no way they'll vote for Clinton, but yet here's Donald Trump over here. But that doesn't mean that they're racist or xenophobic or fall into all these other characteristics. I think that's kind of a mischaracterization of a lot of his supporters.
So we're now going to be faced with another debate here. Oh gosh, how many weeks from now? Or
Two?
a little,
weeks, yeah.
a little bit more. Howard,
Too soon.
What can we expect here? What do you think?
Well, I think more of the same. I think her job is to continue to get under his skin and make sure that people really see that he's not qualified to be president, doesn't have the temperament. I think she'll continue to attack his business accomplishment status. And then I think, to Nolan's point in trying to be a more real person, and we saw this the other night, she started to talk about stories, people who were impacted by Donald Trump and people who are impacted by her policies. And I think that's how she's going to try to increase her likability through the use of personalized stories, real people that people can relate to.
All right, we've got 30 seconds left. So Nolan, I'm going to let you have the last word on this in terms of, gosh, we've never been able to predict what's been going to happen with this election now in the last couple of weeks. But what can we expect to see here?
I think he'll be a lot better prepared next time. He blew off the prep, thought, just like some high school kid, I can go in and ace this test.
Hey, even when I was on the debate team, I had note cards, friends.
And he made fun of Hillary for preparing too.
So I think he'll be better prepared, and I hope they coach him to maybe just don't even listen to what she's saying.
Okay. All right, I want to thank our panel today, Karen Dumas, Howard Adelson, Ingrid Jacques, Nolan Finley. It's always good to see you. And finally tonight, a new initiative to connect and revitalize Detroit neighborhoods. It is called Reimagining the Civic Commons. Detroit is one of 4 pilot cities to receive money to invest in areas that will hopefully reverse recent trends of economic and social fragmentation. The Knight Foundation and the Kresge Foundation are 2 of the funders for this project. We sat down with Carol Coletta from Kresge to explain how this is all going to work.
Detroit was chosen for several reasons. One, we really liked the partnership that had been put together because you had these 2 anchor institutions, University of Detroit Mercy and Marygrove College. And they were in the same neighborhood but very disconnected from one another. And so we thought the energy of anchor institutions in that neighborhood could be really instrumental in terms of its comeback. We also saw Livernois, which was a commercial strip that was pretty depressed. Some efforts have been made to revive it, and I think this will give new momentum to that work. We saw the city's involvement in a unique way that we thought was quite applicable to other cities because there are 25 acres sitting between Marygrove and University of Detroit Mercy. That is, as you know, is a depressed neighborhood. There's some great housing stock, but there are a lot of pockmarks, what I would call empty lots, that are not necessarily contiguous to one another. They make a bit of a zigzag through the neighborhood. So you couldn't easily reclaim it and say, this is a park, right? This is a traditional park with boundaries. But I think what Maurice Cox, the director of the City of Detroit's Planning and Development, department has done is to reimagine that 25 acres and that vacancy as something that could turn from a detriment to an asset by using it to stitch those two anchors together. That's really exciting. We see that as relevant to lots of other cities. Lots of cities are experiencing vacancy and vacant land problems, blight issues. And so if Detroit can create a new model out of this, we think that will be, we think a lot of cities will be eager to pick that up.
The other cities that are part of the program are Chicago, Akron, and Memphis. And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. Our thanks to the crew here at the Detroit Historical Museum for having us. Check us out on Twitter and on Facebook, and of course at MiWeek.org. We will see you next time for MiWeek. Take care.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.